a state of good repair. And then layered on top of that, New Jersey Transit, unlike Metro North and Long Island Railroad, seems to have insufficient engineers to run their trains, which always puzzles me as a transit advocate.
Amtrak and New Jersey Transit often point to each other as the cause of delays on the Northeast Corridor line where both operate. The blame game. Does the blame lie anywhere in particular, or is it more complicated than that?
I would say the blame lies with both entities. They've known about this issue for decades. You know how ancient some of the systems are. Like some of them are pre-World War II. So they've known in advance that all these assets between Secaucus Transfer and the Portal Tunnel entrance to the Hudson River tunnels have to be brought up to a state of good repair. And unfortunately, Amtrak resources are spread very thin on the Northeast Corridor between Washington and Boston, whether it's people who do track maintenance or signal maintainers, and they clearly have not made this a priority to bring this part of the Northeast Corridor up to a state of good repair. And as a result, riders and commuters continue to suffer.
State and federal officials have their eyes trained on a fix. The Gateway Tunnel project would build a second train tunnel under the Hudson and make some repairs to existing infrastructure. How likely is that to relieve any of the pressure we're talking about?
Well, there's a fatal flaw there that no one talks about, in that you can do the work between Secaucus Transfer and the Portal Tunnel entrance in coming years, but they've made it clear to Gateway Development Commission that they will not get to begin work on the 114-year-old Hudson River tunnels as of 2024 until 2036, which means those tunnels are going to continue to deteriorate, and they will be 126 years old in 2036. And layered on top of that, we have no idea whether the Gateway Tunnel project will proceed on schedule, on budget. We have to wait till all the contracts are awarded and are integrated what's known as a master project schedule, which includes the critical path. The more contracts you have in a Gateway Tunnel project, you increase the likelihood that there'll be delays. If contractor A is 6 months late in finishing their work, then contract B cannot get access to the work site. So in my professional experience, we will not know till 2030, which is 6 of the 12 years, or the midpoint of the promised commitment to finish the two new tunnels by 2036, based on where they stand on the budget and schedule, whether or not they'll even meet that commitment in 2036 when they can move the existing service over to the two new tunnels and begin work on the old two tunnels. So stay tuned.
So, Mr. Penn, are you saying that the 2035 a year that we've been given, you're saying that don't count on it?
Well, there's no guarantee, because all the contracts for construction have not been awarded, and the more contracts you have, the greater likelihood that there'll be delays, because contractor A slips 6 months and contractor B can't get access to the work site. I point to an example that they broke up the tunnel contract into 4 contracts. So in my professional experience, until all the contracts are awarded and you have a master contract schedule which integrates all the different contractors' work, and you have to wait a few years to see how they work together in unison, and usually the midpoint, which will be 2030, will give you a good idea of whether they'll meet the 2036 commitment. It's like reading a book or a novel. This is just the first chapter of what I call a 30-chapter novel, so we have to stay tuned. There's no guarantee that they'll finish by 2036.
We have just a couple of seconds left here. I have to ask you this. You know, Amtrak and NJ Transit, they all have legislative committees that provide oversight and so forth. Are these organizations, are these bodies getting together and looking at these issues and saying, let's work together, let's get something done?
They do, and I point out to you, since they receive funding from the Federal Transit Administration, in the interest of transparency, the Federal Transit Administration assigns an independent project management oversight engineer to do oversight over the project, to monitor the budget and schedule. So it'll be interesting to see if the Gateway Development Commission practices transparency and makes the Federal Transit Administration
Mr. Penner, I would love to continue this conversation. Mr. Penner, I would love to continue this conversation, but unfortunately we're out of time. Larry Penner is former director of the FTA's New York Office of Operations and Program Management.
Support for WNYC comes from Focus Features, presenting DD. The summer before high school begins, an impressionable 13-year-old Taiwanese American boy learns what his family can't teach him: how to skate, flirt, and love his mom. Written and directed by Sean Wong, now playing in select theaters.
Markets tumble after disappointing jobs report. Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Amazon Business, focused on offering smart business buying solutions, leaving time to focus on growth. More at amazonbusiness.com.
For Marketplace, I'm Nova Safo in for David Brancaccio. The Labor Department just came out with its July jobs numbers. They're worse than feared. 114,000 new jobs were added to the economy, less than expected. The unemployment rate rose higher than expected to 4.3%. Markets are tumbling on the news. The question now, what does the Federal Reserve do? It has been increasingly focused on the health of the labor market as the inflation rate has approached the central bank's 2% target. But some are worried the Fed has already waited too long to start cutting rates. Joining us live now is Julia Coronado. She's founder and president of Macro Policy Perspectives and a professor at the University of Texas in Austin. Good morning, Julia.
Good morning.
Well, what a jobs report. Analysts are expecting 175,000 jobs added in July. What do you make of the numbers we got and how the Fed might respond?
Well, again, we're still seeing job gains, and we're not close to job losses, but there are a rising number of sectors letting people go, and that jump in the unemployment rate pretty much cements that the Fed will be starting to cut rates in September.
A jump in the unemployment rate. Did you see some good signs in the report that we just got?
There is some nuance. There does seem to be a big number of people on layoff who were put on layoff in July, and that was the primary driver of the rise in unemployment. So hopefully that means they won't stay unemployed for long. But so we'll have to watch in coming months whether that stays and spreads to other sectors or whether that reverses.
And some signs that the labor force participation rate went up, and that could explain the unemployment rate rising too?
That does add to pressure on the unemployment rate. We did see labor force participation rising, and that's usually a good sign that people see opportunities, and that does tend to put upward pressure on unemployment.
Julia Coronado of Macro Policy Perspectives, thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, let's do the numbers. Well, markets are tumbling after that jobs data. They're not convinced of the good news versus the bad. Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ futures are all down. Dow futures are down nearly 500 points. Investors have been piling into the safety of bonds, or the relative safety of bonds. The 10-year Treasury yield, which moves opposite prices, is down sharply at 3.84%. It moved a tenth of a percentage point lower after the jobs report came out. Meanwhile, shares of Intel are down more than 24% in pre-market trading. The chipmaker is cutting about 15,000 jobs as part of a restructuring plan. The bulk of the layoffs are to be completed by the end of the year.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Progressive Insurance, providing direct car insurance rates side by side with other insurance carriers. Customers can see rates and find an option that works for their needs. Now that's Progressive. Learn more at progressive.com.
We're in the middle of another heat wave, which can make cooler parts of the country seem more attractive. A new analysis shows that some Americans are reversing migration patterns, which typically mean people leaving cold states for warmer ones. This trend coincides with a changing climate. For more, let's turn to Marketplace's senior economics contributor, Chris Farrell. He spoke with my colleague, David Brancaccio.
All right, just remind us, 1950s and 60s in particular, it was from the snow belt to the sun belt.
That's right. There are a combination of factors. I mean, look, millions of retirees, they were just fed up with the cold. They went for the warmth and the recreational activities of the Sun Belt. Defense companies, they rose alongside military bases in the region. Established northern industries, they wanted cheap, non-union labor, so they shifted operations south. You had a boom in agriculture, thanks a lot to new farming techniques. So if you take a step back, David, newcomers were attracted by the region's low cost of housing, the growth in job opportunities, low taxes, and warm weather. And the widespread adoption of new technologies like air conditioning made the hot climate bearable.
All right, and to be clear, people are still going to warmer places, but what is it that is making researchers wonder if that trend endures?
Global climate change. I mean, think of the heat waves, the heat domes that have driven temperatures to unsafe levels this summer in the Sun Belt. And this is what two economists from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco write. They say that Americans are starting to migrate away from areas increasingly exposed to extreme heat days toward historically colder areas, which are becoming more attractive as extreme cold days become increasingly rare. And they reasonably speculate that climate change could even lead to a reverse mass migration pattern in coming decades.
Okay. I mean, what are they using for data to get to that kind of hypothesis?
Their study, which they say to their knowledge is the first to document this shift in migration patterns, it starts in 1951, but it really focuses on that area 1970 to 2020. And they match detailed county-level temperature data with county-level population and net migration data. Now, two definitions. Extreme heat, that's defined as a day where the 24-hour temperature is above 80 degrees. Extreme cold is when the average 24-hour temperature falls to 20 degrees or lower. Historically cold counties in the snow belt are becoming less cold over time, and hot Sunbelt counties, they're having more extreme heat episodes than before.
So even with HVAC, and even if you don't live anywhere near rising ocean levels, people are responding to climate change.
That's right. There was this really strong correlation between weather and internal migration in the U.S., but it's weakened in recent decades. So by the 2010 to 2020 period, they say there's little correlation between heat and migration. You know, maybe hot weather just isn't as attractive these days to people living in cooler climates. And in some cases, we've even seen a reversal in the direction of migration. Hotter rural counties, they lost population over the last decade of data relative to colder rural counties. Also, hotter counties have recently witnessed declines among people with a 4-year college degree.
Marketplace's senior economics contributor, Chris Farrell. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And David Brancaccio with that interview. Our executive producer is Kelly Silvera. Our digital producer is Dylan Mietnin. Our engineers are Jessen Dueller, Brian Allison, and John Brunton. I'm Nova Safo with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
WNYC is supported by Apple TV Plus, presenting the comedy series Palm Royale, starring Kristen Wiig and Carol Burnett. Palm Royale is Emmy Awards eligible. More at fyc.appletvplus.com.
Up next, the BBC NewsHour on WNYC. Then it's the Brian Layer Show. Fareed Zakaria walks us through past revolutionary eras as context for the politically turbulent times of today. A conversation and more coming up at 10 this morning on WNYC. 82 with sunshine now. Today, sunny. 93 feeling hotter than that.
This is WNYC FM, HD, and AM New York.
Welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service. Hello, I'm James Menendez. The Kremlin's admitted that the convicted killer released as part of the prisoner exchange with the US was a Russian spy working for the FSB. We'll hear from the investigator who first uncovered his identity and helped negotiate the deal.
We've shown Putin that the world is transactional and there are no really red lines, despite the fact that many countries claim they never negotiate with terrorists and never encourage future hostage-taking. Now that has been flatly proven wrong.
We'll get reaction from Washington and from a politician loyal to Vladimir Putin.
And it's a good example for those people who are working today for Russia, that if something goes wrong, they're going to be saved and they will be greeted as heroes.
Also today, an exclusive interview with a high-ranking North Korean defector who tells us why Kim Jong-un is hoping Donald Trump will be re-elected. First, the news.
Hello, I'm Chris Barrow with the BBC News. The Kremlin has admitted that the convicted hitman, released as part of a prisoner exchange, Vadim Krasikov, was a Russian agent with the FSB security service. Krasikov, who'd been serving a life sentence in Germany, was returned to Moscow overnight, along with 7 other released Russian prisoners and 2 children. Our Europe regional editor, Danny Eberhard, reports.
Vadim Krasikov shot dead a former Chechen rebel commander, Zelimkhan Khangoshvili, in broad daylight in a park in the German capital, Berlin, in 2019. A court ruled that the Russian state had ordered the killing, despite Moscow's denials. Krasikov's release has caused deep discomfort in Germany. Khangoshvili's relatives said they weren't consulted and that they were very disappointed that there seemed to be no law in the world.
One of the high-profile Russian dissidents released in Thursday's prisoner swap has called on people not to forget other Russian political prisoners. Oleg Orlov is the co-chair of the Nobel Peace Prize-winning human rights organisation Memorial, which has been banned in Russia. The organisation says more than 340 people are still classified as political prisoners in Russia. The funeral ceremony has been held in Qatar for the Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh, who was assassinated in Iran on Wednesday. Officials from a number of Arab and Muslim countries attended, as well as prominent figures from Fatah, the main rival Palestinian faction to Hamas. Orla Guerin is in Doha.
We spoke to one man on his way in who, like many, expressed desire for revenge against Israel, which is universally blamed for the assassination. The question is, what is going to come next in the region? Iran has vowed harsh retaliation against Israel. We don't yet know what form that will take and how Israel will respond. But across the region now, there is certainly heightened anxiety about the risk of a slide into an all-out regional war.
Germany has announced it will provide military support to police South Korea's border with North Korea, as it became the 18th country to join the US-led group, the United